نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakum khairan. It's nice to see you all here, brothers, mashallah. I'm going to share my presentation with you, and once we've gone through the presentation, then we will be answering any questions. As Mufti Zakaria Sahab said, he's chairing the questions and he will assign them. Please keep etiquettes in mind when asking and posing questions. If you are here to learn, then alhamdulillah, the ulama are here to try to share what knowledge they have with you. So let's keep this in that frame of mind. So press share screen. There you have it. Hopefully this is now coming up on your screen. So today, inshallah ta'ala, I'm here speaking on behalf of Wifaqul Ulama. And yes, the topic of the day is the Fiqh of Moonsighting, but I think it's also an opportunity to discuss what Wifaqul Ulama is and what it does. The essence of Wifaqul Ulama was brought about, that's very childish, whoever's scribbling on the presentation. The Wifaqul Ulama was established based upon the need for looking at addressing the issue of moonsighting. However, since then, it has not restricted itself to moonsighting. It has then carried on work in other areas. So if you go to the website is there, www.wifaqululama.co.uk, and you will see, for example, that it deals with many other aspects. For instance, we live here as a minority, and living here as a minority, there's many concerns and issues that we have. And unfortunately, we do not have a body of ulama that represents our concerns at national level. The whole purpose of Wifaqul Ulama is to have a body of ulama to represent our concerns on a national level and deal with matters which affect all Muslims. And if you do, as I said, get opportunity to go on there, you will see all that material. It's an established organization, registered. And today our topic is going to be on moonsighting. So I think already we've had conversations about what the importance of moonsighting is. However, we're just going to touch upon that because already the two speakers previous to me have already mentioned it. And then we're going to look at the basis of moonsighting. Following on from that, we're going to explore the ahadith which speak about moonsighting and can be a cause of concern, especially if they're not interpreted properly. And then we touch upon the issue of astronomical data. What role can astronomical data play? What it can and can't do? We then explore the United Kingdom situation. And then we look at what role does astronomy play. Finally, we look at what one should do next. So, as already been mentioned, starting the month by the sighting of the Hilal is not just essential for Ramadan. It is obviously more important when there's acts of worships associated with that month, like Ramadan, or Sha'ban, or Muharram. But as already been mentioned by a speaker previous to me, is that also the Ayyamul Bid, which are the 13th, 14th, and 15th night, where the moon is at its largest, and the night is bright. These are also days in which the Prophet of Allah ﷺ would fast. So we can see that the moon sighting concern that we should have and the moon sighting issue that we should have is not just for being of interest in Ramadan or being of interest in Sha'ban, but this is something that we need to know on a monthly basis, regularly. Therefore, any system that we speak of must have a declaration and sound system in place for every single month of the Islamic calendar. But there are other matters as well. For example, the issue of bulugh. If, for instance, a person is not being mentioned, obviously if they don't have ihtilam, they don't have a wet dream or some other the parameters by which the person becomes baligh, and we have to use time as a measure, then obviously that's something we need to look at. And also iddah after death. So again, because we've unfortunately minimized our own sort of acts of worship or how much we relate to our religion, our focus tends to be on Ramadan, and these other matters we tend to forget this issue for the next 11 or 10 months of the year. So let's explore the hadith first. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Sumu li ru'yatihi wa aftiru li ru'yatihi, fa in ghummiya alaykum ash-shahr fa'uddu 30." We've got the Rawi's name there, which book Muhaddith includes this hadith in their collections. And also we have the hukm of the hadith as well. And if those of you who wish can explore those in your own time by going to the various references that are there. The hadith mentions that fast according to its sighting and break your fast according to its sighting. فَإِنْ غُمِّ عَلَيْكُمُ الشَّهْرِ, and if it proves difficult, if there's cloud cover or some issue, then count 30 days. So the hadith is quite clear, quite simple. Similarly, لا تقدموا الشهر بصيام يوم ولا يومين إلا أن يكون شيء يصوم أحدكم ولا تصوموا حتى تروا ثم صوموا حتى تروا فإن حال دونه غمامة فأتموا العدة 30 ثم أفطروا والشهر 29. That don't precede the month of Ramadan. When he mentions Ash-Shahra, it's referring to Ramadan by fasting a day or 2 days. People wanted to kind of hedge their bets just to be on the safe side. Khunana khasta, let's just say, what if Ramadan started the day before? What if? So why don't we fast it just to be on the safe side? However, the Prophet of Allah is saying quite clearly, don't do that. These are what are referred to as the Ayyam al-Shak or Yawm al-Shak. We have to, when we do acts of worship, be based on certainty. It is only in the absence of acquiring certainty that we can base it on then. Otherwise, we have to base our acts of worship on certainty. It's only if it was absolutely pitch black and we were in the middle of nowhere and we didn't know which direction Qibla was, we could do something called taharri and try to deduce it based upon our surroundings. But that's only in circumstances like that. وَلَا تَسُومُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْهُ, and don't fast until you see it, and then fast until you see it, and then if there comes between you some kind of cloud cover, then complete 30 days, and then fast and break your fast, and a month can be up to 29 days. So we have two possibilities. One is 29 days, and one is a possibility of 30 days. إن أمة أمية لا نكتب ولا نحسب والشهر هكذا وهكذا يعني مرة 29 ومرة 30. That we are an unlettered nation. Now, when we speak about us, we would normally translate this to mean illiterate. We are not people who are profound in education. And also, when we ascribe this to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we're speaking about we're speaking about the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being unlettered. Why was the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam unlettered? He was unlettered because he was a clean sheet for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to write on. A clean sheet. However, this is sometimes misunderstood. And this hadith is misunderstood to mean that we should not engage in any acts which involve any form of literacy, whether it's writing or calculating. A month can be such and such, or it can be such and such, meaning it can be 30 days, or it can be 29 days, and that's the hadith explanation. So let's now understand that hadith. Based on that last hadith, are we allowed to use astronomical data? If the hadith says, Inna ummatun ummiya, that we are an unlettered nation, la naktabu wa la nahsibu, we don't write, meaning we don't have literacy, and nor do we calculate. Is this a hukm? Is this an order from the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Or is this something he's explaining? Well, naturally, we adopt two extremes. One extreme we adopt is that when we interpret the hadith earlier, sumu li ru'yatihi, then we say this ru'ya doesn't necessarily have to be with the eyes. That this ru'ya can be based on calculations. And sometimes a really strange example is given in Surah Fil, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. And he uses the verb tara, to see. Now clearly this is impossible because the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born on the year of the elephants. So he would not have seen it. So they say, oh look, that shows that see can also mean that there's other means of seeing. However, that's a flawed understanding, because when we look at the back end of the hadith, it says, فَإِنْ غُمِّيَ عَلَيْكُمْ. Well, if you were using calculations, how would it be فَإِنْ غُمِّيَ عَلَيْكُمْ? Because the calculation will give you the answer. So it's not that extreme that we say we abandon all form of sighting and all we go to is the calculations. What about the other extreme that says, look, the hadith is clear, inna ummatun ummiya, that you are an unlettered nation. That means we cannot use any astronomical data. We should abandon all that. Well, that's also problematic. Why? Well, if anybody studied Mirath, then you need a pretty decent understanding of fractions. in order to work out what each person gets, a share. And all those who studied in a madrasa, that's one of the subjects which they really struggle with, is mirath. Is they cannot calculate it, because when you're doing awl and then rad and then he gets this person and the asaba gets this, and afterwards you've got a huge mathematical problem at the end. So that clearly shows that we calculate. Okay, when we're calculating zakah and we have X number of camels or X number of sheep or X number of horses or whatever amount of gold, we calculate. When we're trying to determine salah time, the whole reason why ulama produced things within the Muslim world like clocks and astronomy and all these things developed, because we needed to understand our deen, and as a result, that's how these developments came. And then obviously the Europeans borrowed and took them and moved them on. So we cannot take one extreme in which we say that we don't know how to read, we don't know how to write, because that's nonsense. We know how to read, we know how to write. This was a statement which the Prophet of Allah was making regarding the type of people he was referring to, meaning that this is not something we go by sighting, we visualize it, but we are a people who use them in the situation that we require them. So the two extremes we avoid. And also we currently use data. How many of us are actually going outside to determine if the sun has set before we break our fast? None of us. How many of us are going outside to determine when actual Subh Sadiq is taking place before we put the last morsel in our mouth? None of us. What are we using? We're using astronomical data. Okay? So if there was no place for maths, if there was no place for astronomy, if there was no place for it at all in the Sharia, then we wouldn't be able to use it at all. So how do we permit it there? Okay? So that clearly shows that we are using data. But there are types of astronomical data, and unfortunately with us we throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we don't understand physics, because we don't understand astronomy. Unfortunately we just think all astronomy is a bad thing, so we've got to chuck it all out. There's certain things in astronomy which is literally yaqinan. You know tomorrow what time you're going to break fast. You know on Wednesday what time you're going to break fast. How do you know that? The sun hasn't set, but your timetable is telling you what time to break fast. That's a prediction. But because it's such a certain prediction, so much certainty that they can be calculated to the last millisecond, we have certain things which we call virtually yaqeen now. Virtually yaqeen. Things like sunrise, sunset. Okay, all these calculations that we have. But there are others which are dhanni, which are predictive. Can be, can't be. But we will explore that. And also, just because we get people making statements, should we accept it on face value? So if I'm sitting here right now and two brothers come into the masjid and they say, break your fast, the sun has set. Would we break our fast? Well, two witnesses came. Are you dismissing witness statements based on astronomical data? Wala hawla wala quwwata. But of course, because we apply some level of common sense, we'll say, that's really strange, because my watch is saying 3 o'clock, and it really should be 8:30 something. So, okay, brother, where did you see the sunset? Well, I saw it over there. I saw it over there. And this is another area we don't fully understand, which is the Office of Judgeship, qada. So if 4 people come to a qadi, and they say, Fana has done zina with Fana, does the Qazi say, right, go get Fana, we're going to stone him to death? Of course he doesn't. The Qazi will put each witness separately in each room and say, right, describe what you saw. Tell me what you saw. Where was it? What were they wearing? Who was it? Where did you see them? Then he'll ask the next person. And if there's any difference amongst the 4 witness statements, they will be dismissed with the potential of being flogged for making a slanderous statement. So there is no way in our Sharia as a precedent where a qadi is obliged to accept what the Shahada says. It is his job to do so. He will take all matters into consideration, like we see in the law courts here in the UK and in modern law. And again, some people then say, oh, well, are you making an accusation that witnesses lie? Of course not. But witnesses can make mistakes. Okay, witnesses can make mistakes. So that's something we can explore there. So let's look at astronomical data. What is available out there? Well, the first thing is these so-called CVPCs, okay? Crescent Visibility Predictability Curves. I'm sure on the various WhatsApp groups that you're on, this is the time of the year where people will be sending all these fancy colored things, and don't worry, I'll share them with you as well. Bernard Yallop, a scientist, British scientist, he carried out 295 first sightings. He wrote a research paper in 1997. From that, he made algorithms. From the algorithms, he made these predictability curves. So you have predictability curves based on Yallop. Or that he made this based on 737 first sightings. The more data you have, the more accurate your predictions. That's how it works. Okay, for those of us who've got a mathematical background. And then Caldwell and Laney, they did it based on 42 first sightings. That's 3 research papers that exist in which all this data is gathered. What sort of things were they looking at? Well, they were looking at something called the moon's age, and I appreciate this is going to get pretty dull for those people who don't really have an interest in physics or don't really have an interest in maths. But just go with me for now. But I think it's also a point that I'm making, that we get folk who don't really understand the full remit of this and make flippant remarks. Speaking in an area where they lack expertise, speaking in an area where they're using emotional arguments, which are problematic. They're fallacies, fallacious arguments. So then we have what we call the moon's lag time. Now, what's the moon's lag time? The moon's lag time is the time difference between sunset and moonset. It doesn't come as a surprise to anybody that when the sun is in the sky, it's more difficult to see the hilal. That's obvious because the sky is too bright and we need the sky to be darker in order to be able to see the hilal. But likewise, so when the sun sets, we need a time frame between the two in order to be able to see the hilal. Okay, because the hilal is roughly where the sun is setting. So you're looking at roughly the same place in the sky. So the longer that is, the better. Okay. We then have the ARCL. As I said, now it's going to get really boring, so if I hear snoring, it doesn't matter. Angular separation, the moon's altitude, the RCV, angular difference in altitude, the DAS, and we're not talking about washing powder here, relative azimuth, angular difference, and the crescent width. Again, I'm making these points to you, that whoever you choose, obviously in Masjid Umar it's quite clear, but wherever you are on the planet or wherever is listening to this audio or this video, wherever you choose, you need to ensure that the moon sighting committee that you follow have a sound grasp of physics, has a sound grasp of maths, and has a sound grasp of the Sharia. Because you are making them work, you are giving them authority, you are giving them agency to act on your behalf on your acts of worship. That's a big thing. Like we give zakat to a charity, we're making them responsible to ensure that the charity, the zakat is spent in the right place. So we need to take that level of responsibility. Now, it's all put together here. I can see somebody's learned how to play with their crayons, mashallah. May Allah increase their ability to draw squiggly lines on people's presentations. Allah guide us all, Ameen. So we have that crescent society, we have a crescent there, Freudian slip there, we have a crescent there, and then we have the horizon there. And there's the sun, this is my drawings of the sun. Clearly the sun is significantly bigger than the hilal, and but just go with me. But that's how all of that fits in together. We have that triangle where it all fits in together. Here we go. Okay, this is what we've all been waiting for. So this is Yallop. Remember Bernard Yallop, 1997, he had whatever it was, 297 pieces of data in which he then did the predictability. And we start to see that. Now this is a bit old, February 2018. That's the last time I did this, this is the time I did the presentation. Then, you know what they say, why don't you just regurgitate what you've already done? Saves you having to redo a presentation again and again. So you just change the date at the front of the presentation and then you deliver it. So we have here, 1439, a few years back. And we have the various colors. Now, the reason why it goes in like that is because the earth is a sphere. Okay? The earth is not flat. So for those of you who thought the earth was flat, I've just dropped the bomb on you there. Right? So, I can't see the gasps, obviously, because of the face mask, but one or two of you might be going, what the earth is a sphere? And that's why we get this curve. And the reason why we get this curve, and that's why, because this is where the equator is. And the earth is like that. So this bit is obviously sticking out more than this bit is, in a simplistic way. Obviously, those who are on the video can't see what I just did there. So we have the various colors. So red is impossible. No color means not possible. Blue means need of optical aid. This is where we were. So now magenta, which is a fancy man's word of saying purple, really. So that's the London way of saying purple. In Bradford we'll say purple. You guys will say magenta. May need optical aid. Yellow. I don't like the word naked eye, but unassisted eye with perfect conditions. So that these again, remember, these are predictability curves. So let's move on. How do I get rid of that? You're seeing this, aren't you? Yeah. There you go. So I clicked one ahead. Sorry. So this was the South African Astronomical Observatory, if memory serves me well. Slightly different, but you can see that the curves aren't that far off. Remember, they're using different amounts of data. They're using their own algorithms. These are predictability. So you're going to see similarities and slight differences. And then this is the one we see from Auda. You can see now, his reach is quite, it covers more. That makes sense because he used 730 odd pieces of data. The more data you have, the more accurate you can predict. Okay? However, I sat down and I went through all those 737, 297, 411 pieces of raw data. I spent days, if not weeks, going through every single data point. I've not said, and I don't usually say, but for this I think it benefits. My first degree is in applied chemistry. I worked in a international organization, chemical company, for 14 years. I literally became head of research of that organization. And obviously, I have teaching qualifications and blah, whatever. So I'm not just chatting it from my pocket, as they say. Right? I come here with, background. I don't like normally doing that, but I have been told before by people to do mention that because it supposedly gives more credibility to what I'm saying. You would think, we have more trust, but khair. That's that. So I went through every single data point. When I went through every single data point, certain records, for example, I found that, even though there was certain age of the moon, whatever, that you could still see it in certain parts where the predictability said that it would only be seen if the eyes were assisted. But it had been seen by unassisted eyes. And I saw that in a few places. So there were 4 pieces of data. I appreciate very small amount of data. 737, I only found 3 which didn't fit the predictability curve. Now, some of you can work that percentage out. 3 out of 800. It's very, very small. Okay? Very, very small. So the predictability curves are pretty darn good. United Kingdom situation. This is a fact. I appreciate there's a discussion ongoing at the moment that we do get significant amount of cloud cover, which makes it difficult to highly improbable. In fact, that was one of the reasons why back in the when we first arrived on these shores that we went to seek the khabar from outside of our shores. There is effort being made to push this. For example, we have within Wifaqul Ulama the Crescent Chases, and their job in the Crescent Chases is to go out to cite that. And we do get many times positive results. And this is an area which is continuously developing. That's another thing that folk don't understand, that because Wifaqul Ulama or anybody for that matter may have a legal position now, that does not mean that they close their door to research. They are open-minded enough to keep the door to research open. But that's only when we have a very sound system in place to ensure that this is something that can be easily applied. Some people will say, why can't you just act on hadith then? Let's just stick with local, act on hadith. 360 days is all the 12 months are 30. Okay, lunar year is 354 days. If, for example, there were times where we kept going to 30, kept going to 30, kept going to 30, then there would be a potential where we would be out by a few days, and we cannot have a month then with 28 days. So these are the issues. But like I said, this is an open area that we are in conversations and discussions. What alternative do we have? Well, one of the alternatives that we have is to turn to a Muslim country that has a qadi, that has legal authority, or a Muslim country in a non-Muslim setting in which there's a shura. For example, when we came here in the UK, ulama had to set up bodies in order to provide for us, whether it was halal food, whether it was the salah times, whether it was iftar time, all these things they had to do. Because we don't have a Sharia, it's not a Sharia country, we don't have qazis and ministries of halal and all the rest of it. So we have to do that ourselves. We need to make sure that that organization has a legally sound system in place. There has to be an agreement in place between the foreign and the UK committees. And there has to be a legally sound system in the transfer of the ruling. And there has to be monthly declarations. These are all essential. Under no compulsion does the UK moon sighting have to take what comes from outside. It is independent. Okay, it is independent. It is not under any compulsion to go by Moroccan sighting or Saudi sighting or wherever. The UK moon sighting committee is independent. It will take its khabar from where it chooses. Clearly it will have a criteria which has already been mentioned by Qari Sahab, but it will take it from where it chooses. That's important to understand. So what role does astronomy play? We've played with this ball of astronomy for a while now. Well, there's key data that we can accept as near to fact as is possible. Moonrise, moonset. If we can accept sunset as a fact and we break our fasts according to it. If we can accept Subh Sadiq as a fact and we pray Fajr after it, then the moon is no different as a celestial body in its movements. It's no different. So therefore we can take moonrise and moonset as a fact. The age of the moon, well, when we know when the moon has been born, you can work out how old it is. And also these are facts near enough. But these CVPCs are what it says on the tin. They are predictability curves. They are a rule of thumb. They are not facts. They are algorithms. They can assist, but they do not determine. This is where we avoid the two extremes, where one extreme is we're just going to go by astronomical predictions. Forget ru'yat. And then we have the other one which says, no, we're not even going to look at astronomical data. We're just going to go by if a witness comes and says he's seen it, we do it. We avoid those two extremes. We take the middle path. We take the middle path. So if somebody comes up to the qazi or its equivalent and says that they saw the hilal, but the moon had set before the sun, then you know that's impossible. If witnesses came to the qazi and they said that they saw the hilal, but they saw it on a night in which the moon had set before the sun, then that's an impossibility. It's factually impossible. Again, people say, oh, are you calling them liars? Are you calling Muslim liars? No. Why get all emotional? Could have made a mistake. They could have seen a weather balloon. They could have seen Venus. They could have seen X, Y, Z. They could have seen anything. Which clearly they did not see that. We then have what's called the moon set after sunset, but below what we term as imkani ru'ya. Now, even though astronomers will say this is impossible, astronomers will say this is impossible, we, because we give the wadhan to shahada, will say this is highly improbable, because we will not be dictated to by astronomical data which is somewhat more predictive, somewhat more dhanni than yaqini. Even though astronomers would say, no, that's impossible. And then obviously after imkani ru'ya is possible. Imkani ru'ya is based on what? Certain variables, okay? I've not mentioned the variables to you. There's certain variables, moon age, altitude, crescent width, the ARCL, the angle of elongation, certain things it's based on. So what processes exist for Wifaqul Ulama? Well, Wifaqul Ulama have a international satellite, let's call it that. An international satellite in which it has discussions with moon sighting committees from across the globe. From across the globe. Starting from Australia end, working its way through the Indian subcontinent, working its way through the Middle East, working its way through Africa, jumping over the pond, working its way through South America, working its way through North America until the end. Numerous individuals on this platform who represent moon sighting committees from across the globe. So what happens is, nobody sights it in Australia. Let's just say now, tomorrow on the, whatever it is, Wednesday the 13th of May, is it? Is it 13th of May Wednesday? Okay, so on the 13th of May Wednesday, we're all now waiting for the Hilal. Now obviously, Australia will have a chance of seeing the Hilal before us, won't they? Because they're, I don't know, whatever, 10 hours ahead of us or something. Okay? So we see if we get any feedback from our friends and associates in South America. If we don't hear anything from them, we carry on waiting. Let's see if we hear anything from the Far East. Let's see if we hear anything from the Indian subcontinent. Let's see if we hear anything anywhere else. Let's see if we hear anything from Africa. It would be an outlier if, say, somebody in India said that they've declared the start of the new month when nobody saw it before and nobody saw it after. It's an anomaly. It will stand out. Surely those countries that are to the west of that place should also see it, because the moon is now older. The moon is going to stay up longer. So it comes out as an outlier. Then in the UK, we have what's called the UK Crescent Chases. And there are people dotted up and down the country. And their job is to sight the Hilal and then share that information with the ulama so that they can take their witness statement. Also in Europe. So UK, so how do we go about it? That satellite is just a means to determine that a certain country may have got something wrong. If it's the only country that's declared that and no other country has. For the Wifaqul Ulama, it's the local sighting first, UK first. If it's sighted in UK, fantastic. If it's not sighted in UK, then it goes to Morocco, the nearest Muslim country, and with a sound system in place. Once it goes beyond Morocco, as Maulana Qari Sahib mentioned, it goes down to South Africa. There's numerous other countries that there is agencies amongst them, but that's the current system. There are other organizations that also share and work with Wifaqul Ulama, and we have a number of them there. Conclusions. Sighting is given priority as dictated by scriptural evidence. The astronomy is used to reject sightings when the moon sets before the sun. And I've put the word sightings in a speech mark. Astronomy is utilized to interrogate sightings during highly improbable, and if not supported via the global network, then rejection is recommended. Astronomy is utilized to support the witness statements, as a result to accept in order to make a declaration. And that really brings me to the end of my presentation. I have gone through it fairly quickly. I appreciate it's a very technical subject. It is not something you can just absorb in the first time of sitting. You've got to go over it several times. You've got to have some background understanding in physics, a background understanding in astronomy, and some basic understanding in maths, and also obviously understanding in how the Office of Qazi works, and also how the Sharia operates. So it's a multidisciplinary expertise that a person or the group of people must possess in order to make those kind of decisions. So I hand back to Mufti Zakaria Saab, who I'm assuming is there. And I will stop sharing my screen.